Hey, YouTubers! Welcome back to the Evil Bad Book Club. Today we're reading chapter 25 of the Turner Diaries. Stand by. September 4, 1994. Although I've been in Washington nearly a week now, this is the first opportunity I've had to write. After our hectic trip across the country, we spent several hectic days getting 2 of our bombs planted. Then, last night was the first uninterrupted night I've had alone with Catherine since I've been back. And tomorrow, it's another bomb planting mission. But tonight is for writing. Our trip here from California was like something from a zany movie. Even though all the events are still fresh in my mind, I can hardly believe they really happened. Conditions in this country have changed so much in the last 9 weeks that it's as if we had used a time machine to step into an entirely different era. An era in which all the old rules for coping we spent a lifetime learning have been changed. Fortunately for us, everyone else seems just as bewildered by the changes as we are. I was surprised at the ease with which we were able to leave our enclave. The system's troops are all clumped together in just a few border areas along the major highways, with additional company-sized groups stationed at roadblocks on the back roads. These back road troops are doing practically no patrolling, and it is a simple and safe matter to bypass them, which accounts for the fact that so many white volunteers have been able to infiltrate into our area of California since July 4th. We took an army truck north to Bakersfield and then drove northeast another 20 miles to within half a mile of a roadblock manned by black troops. We could see them and they could see us, but they didn't try to give us any trouble as we pulled off the main road onto a rough forest service trail. We were already in the foothills of the Sierra Range. After about an hour of bouncing over the steep, barely passable mountain road, we pulled back onto the highway again, safely beyond the roadblock, but now deep into system-controlled territory. We weren't especially concerned about running into any opposition in the mountains. We knew the largest concentration of system troops was at China Lake, on the other side of the Sierras, and we intended to turn north along Highway 395 before then. Our plan, had we met a supply truck heading for the roadblock back near Bakersfield, was simply to blast it off the narrow mountain highway before its occupants realized we were the enemy. All 5 of us kept our automatic rifles cocked and ready, and we had 2 rocket launchers besides. But we met no other vehicles. We knew that despite the unnatural absence of traffic in the mountains, we would certainly encounter heavy traffic when we reached 395, the main north-south highway east of the mountains. Our reconnaissance patrols hadn't been able to give us anything but a very generalized picture of troop dispositions that far east, and we had no idea what to expect in the way of roadblocks or other controls on vehicular traffic. We did know that fewer than 10% of the system troops in the border area at the time were whites, however. The system was gradually regaining confidence in some of its white troops, but it was still avoiding using them near the border, where they might be tempted to come over to our side. The few white military personnel in the area, even though confirmed race mixers, were regarded with suspicion and treated with the contempt they deserved by the blacks. Our spies had reported several instances in which these white renegades had been humiliated and abused by their black fellow soldiers. Considering this, we had decided that we would have a better chance as non-whites of bluffing our way past any challengers. Accordingly, we had all applied a dark stain on our faces and hands and pinned Chicano sounding name tags on our fatigue uniforms. We figured we could pass as mestizos so long as we didn't run into any real Chicanos. For 4 days, I was Jesus Garcia. Our driver, Corporal Rodriguez, played his role to the hilt, giving a left-handed clenched fist salute and flashing a toothy grin whenever we passed an idle group of black soldiers along the highway. And on the 2 occasions we were stopped at checkpoints, we also kept a transistor radio tuned to a Mexican station, blurring soulful Chicano music whenever we were within earshot of system troops. Once, when we needed to refuel, we were briefly tempted to pull in at a military gasoline depot, but the long line of waiting trucks and the groups of blacks lounging about made us decide against the risk. We stopped instead at a roadside restaurant, curio shop, filling station in the shadow of Mount Whitney. The place seemed deserted, so 2 of our men began filling our fuel tank at the gasoline pump, while I and the others headed for the restaurant to see if we could find any food to take along. We found 4 soldiers inside, quite drunk, sitting around a table cluttered with empty bottles and glasses. 3 were blacks and the 4th was white. "Anybody around here we can pay for gas and some food?" I asked. "No, man, just take what you want. We ran the honky owners out of here 3 days ago," one of the blacks responded. "But not before we had some real fun with their daughter, eh?" the white exclaimed, grinning and nudging one of his companions. Perhaps it was the grim stare I gave him, or perhaps he suddenly noticed Corporal Rodriguez's very blue eyes, or it may have been that the stain on our faces had become too streaked from perspiration. In any event, the white soldier suddenly stopped grinning and whispered something to the blacks. At the same time, he leaned back and reached for his rifle, which was resting against an adjacent table. Before he even touched his weapon, I pivoted my .16 off my shoulder and raked the group at the table with a blast of fire, which sent them all sprawling to the floor, spurting blood. The 3 blacks were quite obviously dead, but their white renegade companion, though shot through the chest, raised himself to a sitting position and asked in a plaintive voice, "Hey man, what the shit?" Corporal Rodriguez finished him off. He pulled his bayonet from his belt scabbard, seized the dying white by his hair, and hauled him off the floor, the point of the bayonet jammed under his chin. "You piece of race-mixing filth, go join your black brothers," and with one savage stroke, Rodriguez practically decapitated him. 5 miles further down the road, at the intersection where we wanted to turn east, a military police jeep with 2 blacks in it was blocking the side road. A 3rd black was directing traffic, waving all northbound military vehicles on down the main highway. We ignored his signals and turned right, going far out on the shoulder to get around the jeep. The black traffic controller blew his whistle furiously, and all 3 MPs gesticulated and waved their arms wildly at us. But our Corporal Rodriguez just grinned and gave his black power salute, shouted, "Siesta frijole, hasta la vista," and a few other Spanish words which came into his head, pointed meaningfully down the road ahead, and stepped on the accelerator. We left the blacks in a shower of dust and gravel. The black with the whistle was still tooting and waving his arms as we went around the bend, and that was the last we saw of him. Apparently, he and his companions did not think it worthwhile trying to follow us, but our 3 men, hidden in the back of the truck, kept their fingers on the triggers of their automatic rifles, just in case. From there, until we got to the outskirts of St. Louis, we didn't run into more concentrations of system troops. But we accomplished that only by avoiding the major highways and cities and sticking to secondary roads. We rattled and bounced across the mountains and deserts of California, Nevada, Utah, and Colorado, and then the plains of Kansas and the rolling hills of Missouri for 75 hours straight, stopping only to refuel and relieve ourselves. While two of us rode in front and a third kept watch out the back of the truck, two of us at a time tried to sleep, but without much success. When we reached eastern Missouri, we changed our tactics for two reasons. First, we heard the radio broadcast of the bombing of Miami and Charleston and the organization's ultimatum to the system that made the time factor even more important than before. We couldn't afford any further delays from circuitous routes along back roads. Second, the danger of our being stopped by the authorities between St. Louis and Washington decreased sharply as all hell broke loose in the country, giving us the opportunity to adopt a new ploy. We had been monitoring both the civilian broadcast band and the military communication bands during the trip, and we were about 80 miles west of St. Louis when a special announcer cut into the afternoon weather report. The previous day at noon, a nuclear bomb had been detonated without warning in Miami Beach, and an announcer said, killing an estimated 60,000 people and causing enormous damage. A second nuclear bomb had been detonated outside Charleston, South Carolina, just 4 hours ago, but casualty and damage reports were not yet available. Both bombings were the work of the organization, said the announcer, and he would now read the text of an organization ultimatum. I jotted down the ultimatum almost word for word on a scrap of paper as it came over the truck radio, and this is very nearly it. To the President and the Congress of the United States and the commanders of all U.S. armed forces, we, the Revolutionary Command of the organization, issue the following demands and warning. First, cease immediately all buildup of military forces in Eastern California and adjacent areas and abandon all plans for an invasion of the liberated zone of California. Second, abandon all plans for a nuclear strike against the liberated zone of California or any portion of it. Third, make known to the people of the United States through all communication channels at your disposal these demands and this warning. If you have failed to comply with any one of these our three demands by noon tomorrow, August 27th, we will detonate a second nuclear device in some population center of the United States, just as we detonated one in the Miami, Florida area a few minutes ago. We will continue to detonate one nuclear device every 12 hours thereafter until you have complied. We furthermore warn you that if you make any surprise hostile move against the liberated zone of California, we will immediately detonate more than 500 nuclear devices which have already been hidden in key target areas throughout the United States. More than 40 of these devices are now located in the New York City area. In addition, we will immediately use all the nuclear missiles still available to us to destroy the Jewish presence in Palestine. Finally, we warn you that in the event we intend to liberate first the entire United States and then the remainder of this planet. When we have done so, we will liquidate all the enemies of our people, including in particular all white persons who have consciously aided those enemies. We are aware now, and we will continue to be aware, of your most confidential plans and of every order you receive from your Jewish masters. Abandon your race treason now, or abandon all hope for yourselves when you fall into the hands of the people you have betrayed. Note to reader: Turner's version of the organization's ultimatum is essentially correct, except for a few minor errors in wording and his omission of one sentence from the next to last paragraph. The full exact text of the ultimatum is in Chapter 9 of Professor Anderson's definitive history of the Great Revolution. We had pulled off the road when the general announcer came on, and it took us a few minutes to gather our thoughts and decide what to do. We had not really expected things to develop so rapidly. Those fellows who took the warheads to Miami and Charleston must have either left a day or two ahead of us, or they must have really been burning up the highways to get there so soon. Despite our nonstop driving, we felt like a bunch of shirkers. I knew the fat was really in the fire. We were in the middle of a nuclear civil war, and within the next few days, the fate of the planet would be decided for all time. Now it was either the Jews or the white race, and everyone knew the game was for keeps. I still haven't figured out all the details of our strategy leading up to the ultimatum. I don't know why. For example, Miami and Charleston were chosen as initial targets. Although I've heard a rumor that the rich Jews who were evacuated from New York were being temporarily housed in the Charleston area, and Miami, of course, already had a superabundance of Jews. But why not take out the New York City area instead, with its 2.5 megakikes? Perhaps our bombs weren't really in place yet in New York, despite what our ultimatum said. And I'm also not sure why our ultimatum took the particular form it did. All stick and no carrot. Perhaps it was deliberately intended to stampede the cattle, which indeed it has. Or perhaps there were some under-the-table communications between Revolutionary Command and the system's military leaders which determined the form of the ultimatum. In any event, it has had the effect of splitting the system right down the middle. The Jews and nearly all the politicians are in one faction, and nearly all the military leaders are in another faction. The Jewish faction is demanding the immediate nuclear annihilation of California, regardless of the consequences. The accursed Goyim have raised their hands against the chosen people and must be destroyed at any cost. The military faction, on the other hand, is in favor of a temporary truce, while an effort is made to find our 500, a forgivable exaggeration, nuclear devices and disarm them. After hearing that broadcast, our only thought was to get our deadly cargo to Washington as soon as possible. We knew everyone would be off balance for a while as a result of what had happened, and we decided to take advantage of the general confusion by converting our truck into an emergency vehicle and barreling straight down the highway toward our destination. We didn't have a siren, but we did have flashing red lights front and rear, and we completed the conversion a few minutes later by stopping in a rural hardware store and buying some cans of spray paint, which was some hastily improvised stencils made from torn newspapers we used to paint Red Cross symbols on the appropriate places on our truck. After that, we made Washington in less than 20 hours, despite the chaotic conditions on the highways. We sped along shoulders to get past stalled traffic, drove on the wrong side of the road with horn blaring and lights flashing, bounced over culverts and open fields to get around blocked intersections, and generally ignored all traffic controllers, bluffing our way through more than a dozen checkpoints. Our first bomb went into Fort Belvoir, the big army base just south of Washington, where I was locked up for more than a year. We had to wait 2 maddening days to make contact with our inside man there so we could arrange to get the bomb inside the base and hidden in the right area. Rodriguez went over the fence with the bomb strapped on his back. I received a radio signal from him the next day confirming the successful completion of his mission. Meanwhile, the rest of us planted a second bomb in the District of Columbia, where it will be able to take out a couple of 100,000 blacks when it goes, not to mention a few government agencies and a critical portion of the capital's transportation network. I didn't have my final orders on the third bomb until this afternoon. That will go into the Silver Spring area north of here, the center of the Maryland suburban Jewish community. The fourth one is intended for the Pentagon, but security is so tight there, I still haven't figured a way to get it anywhere near the place. I must confess that my mind has not been exclusively on my work since I've been back here. Catherine and I have stolen time from our organization responsibilities to be together. Neither of us has realized how much we have come to mean to each other until we were separated again this summer. So soon after my escape from prison, in the month we were together this spring before I was sent to Texas and then to Colorado and finally to California, we became as close as any two people can possibly be. Things have been hard for Catherine and the others here while I was gone, especially since July 4. They have been under enormous pressure from two directions. The organization has been pushing them without mercy to continually step up their level of activism, while the danger of being caught by the political police has grown worse every week. The system is resorting to new methods in its fight against us. Massive house-to-house searches of multi-block areas, astronomical rewards for informers, much tighter controls on all civilian movement. In many other parts of the country, these repressive measures have been more sporadic, and they have broken down entirely in those areas where the system has not been able to maintain public order, especially since the panic caused by the bombings of Miami and Charleston. But around Washington, the system still has things in a very tight grip, and it's tough. Late this afternoon, Catherine and I slipped out of the shop for a couple of hours and went for a walk. We strolled by several groups of soldiers in sandbagged machine gun emplacements outside the office buildings, on past the smoke-blackened rubble of a suburban subway station in which Catherine herself had planted a dynamite bomb just 2 weeks ago, through a park-like area where a loudspeaker mounted high on a lamppost was blaring out exhortations to all right-thinking citizens to immediately report to the political police the slightest manifestation of racism on the part of their neighbors or co-workers, and out onto one of the main highway bridges across the Potomac River from Virginia to the District of Columbia. There was no traffic on the bridge because it ended abruptly 50 yards from the Virginia shore. In a tangle of shattered concrete and twisted, reinforced rods, the organization had blown it up in July, and no effort had yet been made to repair it. It was fairly quiet there at the end of the bridge, with only the screaming of police sirens in the distance and the occasional clatter of police helicopters swooping overhead. We talked, we embraced, and we silently surveyed the scene around us as the sun went down. We and our companions have certainly made an influence on the world in the last few months, both on the suburban world of ordinary white people on the Virginia side of the bridge and on the system's world of bustling government offices on the other side. And yet the system is all too evidently still alive all around us. What a contrast with the situation in California. Catherine was full of questions about what life is like in the liberated zone, and I tried to tell her as best I could. But I'm afraid that mere words are inadequate for expressing the difference between the way I felt in California and the way I feel here. It is more a spiritual thing than merely a difference in the political and social environments. As we stood there talking above the swirling eddies at the end of the bridge, our bodies pressed together. The world growing dark around us, a group of young Negroes came out onto the other stump of the bridge from the Washington side. They began horsing around in typical Negro fashion, a couple of them urinating into the river. Finally, one of them spotted us, and they all began shouting and making obscene gestures. For me, at least, that accentuated the difference, which I could not find words to express. And that's chapter 25, folks. So come back Monday for chapter 26. Come back tonight for the breakdown of chapter 25, and I'll check you YouTubers out later.